Welcome to today's 5-minute Bible study in the book of 2 Timothy. Today we're concluding chapter 1 of 2 Timothy, and that is verses 15 through 18. It's the last paragraph of this opening chapter of the letter. Now, remember, of course, Paul is writing to Timothy. He's already indicated that he's a prisoner. We know he's a prisoner in Rome. And as he concludes this first chapter, he is giving Timothy some personal information about himself. He's going to tell him about some who were supporters of Paul who have deserted him, and about some who have proven themselves wonderfully loyal to Paul even in the midst of difficulty. So let's look what it says in these verses 15 through 18 of chapter 1. You know, Paul says, that everyone in the province of Asia has deserted me, including Philadelphus and Hermogenes. Now, when he says the province of Asia, he's referring to Asia Minor, which is where Ephesus is located. You remember from 1 Timothy that Timothy had been left in Ephesus to oversee the congregation there. So obviously there were some from that area, believers who had accompanied Paul on some of his missionary journeys and had been with him in Rome, but have now deserted him. Probably when Paul was arrested, placed in prison by the Romans, when it looked like it was not going to turn out well, when it looked like Paul was going to be executed, and that is coming. Paul knows that. But some deserted Paul out of fear. They didn't want to get caught up in what was about to happen to Paul. And so though they had been with him in the past, they did not continue their loyalty. And so Paul simply tells Timothy about this. There are some from the province of Asia. He mentions two names in particular who have proved disloyal. They have abandoned the way of following Christ, and they have abandoned me. But not everyone has. Now Paul's going to talk about someone who's been extremely loyal, even in difficult times. He says in verse 16, May the Lord show mercy to the household of Onesiphorus, because he often refreshed me, and he was not ashamed of my chains. So it refers to someone else that Timothy would know who has continued in his loyalty, someone who has supported Paul in the past and continues to do so, even when Paul was in chains. You see, this person's friendship was not based on circumstances, but even when it was risky to be a friend of Paul, this family continued their friendship, continued their loyalty to Paul and their loyalty to the gospel. He goes on to say about him, when he was in Rome, he searched hard for me until he found me. In other words, he searched until he found where Paul was and managed to visit him in prison. What loyalty. That would have put himself at risk to come to prison and visit Paul, but he did it because he was loyal to the gospel. May the Lord grant that he will find mercy from the Lord on that day. You know very well in how many ways he has helped me in Ephesus. So obviously someone that Timothy knew from the province of Asia, from the city of Ephesus, who has helped Paul and not deserted him in times of imprisonment. Paul is simply letting Timothy know how things are going with him, both the good and the bad. This also is part of the reasons why later in the letter, Paul will encourage Timothy to come to him as soon as possible, because he wants to see him again before the end comes. Now, this little paragraph is just a reminder to us that when we follow Christ, the way is not always an easy way in the world. Sometimes we suffer for following Christ, as Paul was suffering. Sometimes there's persecution from unbelievers. Sometimes there's harassment from those who are against the church. It is, after all, the way of the cross that we walk. Jesus said to his disciples, you can follow me, you're going to have to carry a cross. Paul knows that quite well, and he's had to endure those times of carrying the cross. He understands that. And so he's simply being honest with Timothy about the difficulties that are sometimes involved in the Christian life. There are some who were able to handle that, like Onesiphorus, who supported Paul no matter how difficult it was. There were some, however, who, when the way got tough, they abandoned the way. So it's an encouragement to Timothy. Stay true, stay loyal, hold firm to the gospel. When times are going well, when times are going difficult, when it's easy, when it's hard, no matter what, stay loyal to Jesus. Paul did. He lauds those also who've done the same, and encourages Timothy in that same kind of steadfastness and way of faith. Hope you join us for our next session in the study of 2 Timothy. Next time we'll start the second chapter of this wonderful book of 2 Timothy. So join us for our next 5-minute Bible study in this little book of 2 Timothy.